For decades, it was a shadow war, fought with spies, proxies, and secret operations. But now it has absolutely exploded into the open. The United States, Israel, and Iran are in a direct, full-blown conflict. So the big question is, how on earth did we get here? Let's break down the critical moments that pushed everyone over the edge. Mark this date on the calendar, February 28, 2026. This is the day the firestorm really began. A long, simmering conflict just boiled over into a massive regional war that has rattled the entire planet. So in this explainer, we're going to try and answer that one huge question. How did this happen?
This war didn't start with a protest or some small border clash. Nope, it kicked off with a sudden, overwhelming, and, well, a decapitating blow.
So on that day, U.S. and Israeli forces unleashed this massive, coordinated surprise attack all across Iran. The scale was just immense. But the truly shocking part? The main target, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in the strikes. The official line was that Iran's nuclear program and its power in the region had just become an intolerable risk, and that, every single diplomatic option was off the table.
Well, Iran's response was as fast as it was furious. And this wasn't just a single act of revenge. It was a huge multi-front assault. They launched waves of missiles and drones at Israel. At the same time, American military bases all over the Middle East came under intense fire. And crucially, Iran went for the economic jugular, hitting ports, energy facilities, and those vital shipping lanes. Just like that, the shadow war was over. This was real. To really get why the fire started in 2026, you've got to look at the kindling that was laid down for more than 70 years. So let's rewind the clock and see how these countries went from being partners to bitter, bitter enemies. It's actually kind of hard to believe now, but the US and Iran, they used to be partners. That all started to change back in 1953 when the CIA helped overthrow Iran's democratically elected leader. That act planted seeds of deep resentment. But the real breaking point was the 1979 Iranian Revolution. It installed an Islamic republic that was openly hostile to the U.S. And then the 444-day hostage crisis at the American embassy, well, that cemented the animosity for decades. After that, the fight just moved into the shadows. Iran started backing groups like Hezbollah, and Israel hit back with things like cyber attacks and assassinations.
Now, it is really tempting to look at all this and say, oh, it's a religious conflict. But that's missing the real story. The source material makes it super clear. This thing is fundamentally about geopolitics. That 1953 coup created this powerful, deep-seated belief in Iran that Western powers could never, ever be trusted. And that feeling is what fueled the revolution in '79, and it's pretty much defined the relationship ever since. It's a rivalry born from power and influence, not just faith.
So this brings us to the key strategy that defined this whole era, the proxy war. Think of it this way. Instead of fighting each other head-on, which would be catastrophic, they fought through others. Iran would give money and weapons to groups that hated Israel, and in return, Israel would conduct these secret operations inside Iran. It was this deadly, deniable, and constant state of low-grade warfare.
But here's the thing about proxy wars. You can't contain that much hatred and suspicion forever. Eventually, the shadows pull back and the fight spills out into the open. And the first major crack in that system? It appeared in 2025.
In June of 2025, the whole game changed. First, Israel launched a major air campaign against Iran's nuclear program. Then, Iran did something new. It didn't just respond through its proxies, it fired its own missiles directly at Israel. That's the moment the United States jumped in, using its heavy-duty firepower to hit these super-deep, hardened underground targets. A shaky ceasefire was patched together after 12 brutal days, but the damage was done. The unspoken rule about direct conflict, it had been broken.
And here's the absolute kicker from that 2025 war. After all that firepower, all that destruction,
Military experts basically concluded the strikes only set back Iran's nuclear program by a few months, not years, months. For the decision makers in Israel and the US, this wasn't a win. It was a giant red flag. It proved that these limited strikes just weren't going to cut it, which created the justification for the much, much bigger decapitation strike a year later.
Okay, so with the war now completely out in the open, what are the ultimate goals here? What is each side really truly trying to achieve with all this devastation?
This table really lays it all out. For Israel, this is existential. Their number one goal is the complete and total destruction of Iran's nuclear program. The US has slightly broader aims. Yeah, they want to prevent a nuclear Iran, but they also want to roll back its influence in the region and protect their allies. And Iran, for them, it is all about one thing: survival. Preserving the regime, holding onto their power, and keeping their weapons programs no matter the cost.
And this right here, this is a subtle but absolutely critical difference between the allies. For years, the U.S. strategy was containment. Manage Iran, keep it in a box. But for Israel, containment is just not enough anymore. Their strategic goal is now regime change. They see the government in Tehran as a threat that you can't manage. You can only remove it.
And make no mistake, this is not just some distant regional conflict. The shockwaves from this war are being felt all across the globe, and they're affecting everything from our wallets to our alliances.
Take a look at this number, 20%. That's how much of the entire world's oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's this tiny little waterway that Iran now basically threatens to shut down. This one choke point gives Tehran incredible leverage over the whole global economy.
The fallout has been, frankly, catastrophic. You've got the tragic human cost, of course. But beyond that, the war has sent economic shocks everywhere, messing with energy markets and driving up inflation. Politically, it's created huge rifts. Traditional U.S. allies in Europe and NATO, they're refusing to get involved. And maybe the most dangerous part of all, it has completely torched any foundation for diplomacy, leaving almost no path to peace.
So if you take one thing away from this, it should be this. The war that blew up in 2026 was not a surprise. It was the final chapter of a story that's been written over decades. A story of geopolitical chess, of a deep-seated mistrust that goes all the way back to 1953, years of shadowy proxy fighting, and of course that ever-present fear of a nuclear-armed Iran.
And that brings us right back to today. Thousands of airstrikes later, global markets are in chaos, and there is no clear endgame for anyone. With diplomacy completely broken and the fighting just getting worse, it leaves all of us with one really unsettling question. What happens next when there is no end in sight?